Hello, very good morning to you. You are watching Breakfast with Dan Walker and Louise Minchin.
Lots to pack in this morning. Spanish ministers are in talks with the government here about excluding the Canary and the Balearic Islands from the new rules which force British tourists coming home from Spain to quarantine for 2 weeks. That's what we've been speaking about a lot this morning. As promised, we can speak to the government now. The Care Minister, Helen Whately, joins us live from Westminster. Good morning to you. We've got plenty to get through today. Lots of people sending in questions and comments and their concerns about their own foreign holidays. Can we start with this rule change with regards to Spain over the weekend? Why did it have to happen so quickly?
Good morning, and very good to speak to you this morning. Well, we needed to act quickly, and I think the public would welcome that. So it was the right thing to do. What happened is we saw data coming in from Spain just at the very end of last week, showing us that the rates of COVID were going up rapidly in many parts of Spain. We looked at it, we took the advice from the Chief Medical Officer of Public Health England, the Joint Biosecurity Centre, and we had to make the decision to act very rapidly and decisively and impose a quarantine. Because after all the hard work and the sacrifices that were made during our lockdown period, and now we're able to cautiously, carefully reduce some of those restrictions, we cannot take the risk of going back to a situation where you have rising rates of COVID happening across the country. And we know, I know it's hard for the many people who are on holiday in Spain, but there are thousands of people in Spain who will be coming back, and we've got to make sure, so say, that we keep the coronavirus rate down in the United Kingdom.
And there are, I'm sure you appreciate this, there are thousands of people who are trying to organise holidays, trying to think about booking holidays. There are two of your own ministers who are in Spain at the moment. Could you try and explain to us, if we could sort of try and get, I know you mentioned the numbers there, what was the trigger point? Is there a number that was passed in Spain that led to that change of advice? Because there'll be people this morning who are thinking, and looking at other countries like France, Germany, Greece, thinking, if I can try and predict what will happen there, based on the government's decision with Spain, they can then try and make a decision about their own holiday in the coming weeks and months.
I realise that, and what we looked at and took the scientific advice on was on the picture of the rates going up in several parts of Spain. And that's both the overall rate of cases, but also what we call the positivity rate. So that's a proportion of tests that are coming in positive. What I would say to people who are planning holidays, looking at going abroad, I realise it's really, really hard thing to do. Look at the Foreign Office advice, check your travel insurance, check the conditions from the tour operator. And you have to be mindful that we're in a situation of a global pandemic. We have to continue to keep the situation under review. We put in place the travel corridors so that it would be easier for people to go on holiday, recognising that people wanted to go on holiday overseas. But what we said when we put that policy in place was that we would have to keep the situation under review. As we have done in Spain, we've taken the action which was the right thing to do, because we have to put the public health of the United Kingdom, the country, first.
OK, and in terms of that Foreign Office advice, I think this is a real area of concern for lots of people this morning, because sort of trying to get clarity on mainland Spain and the Canary Islands and the Balearics as well, because the Foreign Office are saying they are sort of, their guidance is all about all but essential travel to mainland Spain, but that does not include the Canary Islands and the Balearics. So you can go there and still get your travel insurance, and yet if you come back from those islands, Canary Islands and the Balearics, you then have to quarantine for 2 weeks on your return to the United Kingdom. Can you understand why there is a lack of clarity for many of our viewers and many people who are planning holidays, who are on holiday at the moment, about what will happen with those islands? Are there going to be changes to the government policy on that?
So, yes, I understand, and let me explain that the Foreign Office gives advice based on the individual risk to a traveller. And in the islands where the rates are lower, the risk to an individual of getting COVID is that much lower. But the public health advice has to be based on what is the right thing for the public health of the UK and the UK population. And the situation is that some of the islands, the rates are indeed going up. Also that there is some movement of travel between the islands and the mainland. So we had to do a clear policy that would best protect the United Kingdom.
So there's no talk of a regional quarantine at any stage, which we've just been speaking to the boss of TUI, one of the big travel firms. That's what they are pushing for. Is there any chance of that happening?
I recognise that, and it was something that was discussed, is would it make sense to look at different regions differently. One thing we saw was that the rate was going up across many regions of Spain. Also, people travel between regions, and so you then get a situation where people may go from one to another. It was much better, the decision was taken based on the scientific advice, much better for protecting the public health of the country to have a clear decision on quarantining for people coming back from across mainland Spain and the islands.
OK, but if you look at the actual, look at the data, the Spanish Foreign Minister, Arantxa González, talks about the efforts at the moment are being focused around excluding from the quarantine measures the Balearic and the Canary Islands. And she says for two reasons. One, these are islands, they're very safe territories. And two, she points to the epidemiological data is extremely positive and well below that in the UK. And just to give you the figures on those, in the past fortnight, for example, Catalonia saw more than 8,500 new infections. In the Balearic Islands, it was just 92. That's a pretty strong case, isn't it?
So I recognise that the rates are lower in the islands. What I will say again is we are still seeing the rates going up very rapidly in some locations, not just in the mainland Spain. And we've had to take the scientific advice, public health advice on what is the thing that will best protect the UK. We've been through an incredibly tough time. All the sacrifices that people have made during lockdown, all the things that have been missed, the consequences for our economy are very, very serious. We know we must keep the rate in the UK right down. We don't want to see a second spike in winter. We're doing all the planning that we can to make sure that we avoid that. We cannot take the risk. We have to do what is right for the public health of the nation.
Have you got a foreign holiday booked?
I haven't. I'm hopefully going to go on holiday within the UK.
OK, so I'm just interested in the decision that you're making as a family. Have you considered that? Would you consider that? Have you changed your mind based on what's happened?
Well, it just so happens that every year for the last few years, my family have gone on holiday within the UK. But I mean, what I would say to people who are planning to go abroad is, look very carefully at the situation. You have to weigh up the risks, look at the advice, look at your insurance, and just be aware that reality is we are in a global pandemic and we have to do what is the right thing for the health of the nation.
And the other thing that people are talking to us about this morning is this rights they have on their return if they are having to quarantine. Let me read you this. This is the travel editor from Which magazine, Rory Boland. He says, if you have an employer that says you'll lose your job if you don't come in, the government says you have to quarantine, what do you do? What's the answer?
So we're asking employers to be supportive and understanding in their situation. There are people who went on holiday to Spain not expecting to quarantine when they come back, and now they're having to quarantine because that is the right thing for protecting the health of the country. What we have seen the whole way through the pandemic is people being responsible, taking responsible decisions. Many, many employers supporting their employees.
Okay,
There's been a huge amount of support to businesses.
How do you be supportive and understanding? How can you sort of do that when some people are getting in contact with us already this morning and saying they'll just be told to come back into work?
Well, it's absolutely imperative that people who have landed back since just 1 minute after midnight on Sunday morning must quarantine because they've been in areas in a country where the rates are higher than they are in the UK. That is the scientific advice, and it's really important that people play their part in protecting the country from the risks of the virus rate going up again, because we know the consequences of that. And as I say, we need employers to be understanding and supportive. The government has provided a huge amount of support to businesses over the last few months. That support is ongoing. There have been millions of jobs funded through the furlough scheme. There are grants to businesses. There have been business rate exemptions, help with VAT, so much support going there. So actually it's really important that businesses are supportive to enable people to quarantine.
There's also the issue which Simon Calder raised, the travel expert, talking about the martini menace. I don't know what your drink of choice is, but he was saying the quarantine might come anytime, any place, anywhere. And there are spikes as well in France and in Germany. There are many people who are planning trips to countries like that in the next few days and weeks. Might we see similar restrictions implemented on those countries?
Well, what I think you would like to see, what the British public want to see, is us keeping the situation under review and us taking the decisions that are needed to keep the United Kingdom safe. So what we've said, and we've said all along, is that we will continue to look at the rates, and if we see rates going up, we would have to take action.
OK, I've got to speak to you about obesity this morning as well. I know there's lots of questions with regards to what's going on with Spain. Thank you for addressing some of those